Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. Give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. Go subscribe to that as well.
We're presented by Tito's Handmade Vodka.
The #1 vodka in America.
Savor responsibly. We just came from another Niners practice on Tuesday in Santa Clara, and we begin where we got to begin, right, which is with the quarterback review. Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance. A lot more purely second team for Trey Lance on Tuesday, but what'd you think? Getting another chance, the third time we've gotten to see these guys in pads this last 2 weeks.
I'd say this practice was a lot different than the other ones we attended. It was very situational specific. Now, they've done red zone before, but they started, at the 20-yard line, needing to go 80 with 2 minutes on the clock. They ran a 4-minute drill. And when you do something like that, Kyle has, in the other practices we've attended, he cooks the books, as I put it, with the skill guys, right? George goes in and out with both quarterbacks. Brandon Ayuk, Debo, and Mohamed Sanu just kind of rotate in and out. Well, when you go 9 plays, not only are McGlinchey and Alex Mack sucking wind, everyone is exhausted, right? And I've always said this about Joe Judge making the guys run gassers. If you watch skill guys, even the linemen, but definitely the skill guys, they run so much on every play. Even a run play, they are running 10 yards down the field. Like Debo Samuel, you could tell, like, God, it's probably pretty tiring doing that job.
I thought the same thing watching Kittle.
So Jimmy looked good. Now, his skill guys are pretty locked and loaded. Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, George Kittle. And as you pointed out, as he hits George Kittle like every other pass, like, man, I'd probably throw it to 85 a lot too. He has a big, like, it's not an apples to apples comparison. I think we've been judging those two guys based on throwing to both guys, and it looks different. Like, to me, Trey Lance was just going with clearly way worse players. Now, Jimmy looked good. I'm not going to act like Jimmy
I thought Jimmy Garoppolo looked better than Trey Lance on Tuesday.
Yeah. But like I said, it's not – can you do apples and apples comparison when they're not throwing to the same guys?
Not throwing to the same guys, and I think probably just as big a deal not being protected by the same guys. Like the offensive line's a major factor. Like Trey Lance tried to spin out of the pocket, ran right into a sack in the red zone. It's too hard to know whether or not that same situation arises with the first team around him.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not necessarily going to live practice to practice. My stance is not going to change unless he just completely falls apart in games or whatever. I would just go with the young guy and live with some growing pains for the big picture. But like today, coaches don't look at, like, I come from the scouting angle. Coaches do not. He comes from, like, my first drive against the Detroit Lions, who gives me the better chance to complete the 7 plays I want to run. There was a play today. They clearly did like some situational drill in the red zone, 6 seconds left, and you must have been down like 6 points. I didn't look at but they were not playing for a field goal. And Jimmy,
the scoreboard says they were up to 10-3, so I don't know what that means.
Jimmy scores a touchdown. You have 6 seconds. So if the guy's not open right away, you probably got to just spike it into the ground. Trey does like 360s, goes out the corner, and Kyle just blows the whistle and kicks him off the field. Not like he's in trouble, but like you don't get a second rep. It's over, right? We had 6 seconds. And those are the type things why, again, my stance, I would start Trey Lance. It's going to be probably a little more difficult than I originally thought for Trey to start with stuff like that, because coaches, I don't know, Adam Peters, John Lynch, where they stand on this, and clearly they'll just lean with Kyle. But, like, I know for a fact how much coaches value. I mean, we've been hearing Bill Belichick, right, talk about their players for 20 years, talk about how well prepared they are, situational football. You know why? Because if you fuck up, like, he's not putting you in the situation. That's important for the offensive coordinator when you don't know the time on the clock.
Yeah.
Now, in our experiences, you and I have been going out there, today felt a lot different of a day than I think the other day.
Well, and I
very
think
specific. It was cool.
The 2-minute drill offense, which we saw, and then we've seen a lot of red zone, but the 2-minute drill offense really feels real, right? It really feels real, and you had the first team out there for several snaps in a row against the first team. Let's take a moment to tell you people that this is brought to you in part by DraftKings promo code HAM.
Download the app. Use the promo code HAM when you do.
And by our friends at decked.com/ham. Woo, look at that.
Decked.com/ham. Go get it if you got a truck. And red zone's different when it's not like you just get 5 red zone plays, no down and distance, and just like there's 10 seconds.
Yeah.
You better figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I love when the 2-minute drill ends with red, like it leads right to red zone, right? But I think when you think about this team specifically, and this is where I think in some ways it's easy. I don't want to say easy for Kyle to just go with Jimmy, but I think the logic is pretty easy to follow, right? In that we think we're going to run the hell out of the ball. We got like 4 running backs, right? If you're Kyle, that's how you're thinking about it. We got all these big offensive linemen. I got Kittle, I got Debo, I got Ayuk, so we can take enough shots. We think we're going to be pretty good on defense. We play the Detroit Lions week 1. Jared Goff, we've had a lot of success about him. That team's not better than us. They're less talented than us, and they're far less experienced together than us, right? So if you're looking at it, you're like, how do we lose that game? What has to happen for us to lose that game? We got to make uncharacteristic mistakes. We got to do things in an undisciplined fashion. We got to turn the ball over. We got to do dumb shit to lose that game, right? I think you kind of look at it that way. And so from that perspective, you go, why? I can see if you're Kyle going, why am I taking this big swing? Because over the next 5 years, it'll pay off for Trey Lance. When I'm trying, I think my team's good. I've got a bunch of guys on 1-year contracts. I think I'm trying to compete to win this division, to win the NFC, to go to the Super Bowl, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just trying to beat the Lions and make sure I'm 1-0 this week. And I again, it's people who are pro Trey Lance for sure. It's not anti-Jimmy. I can understand that logic. To me tracks. That's how you end up with Garoppolo starting week 1. But I also think a big part.
You could also say it's an easy landing spot, right? You're not playing.
If there's such a thing for a rookie, but can you assume wins with a rookie quarterback? I don't. Yeah, you're right. You're right. But we saw last year the Dolphins didn't look at it that way. They were like, we're just going to wait until we think he's ready. And as it turned out, they went back and forth and back and forth. He wasn't. Maybe in the end it was worth it, but probably was.
It's crazy thing he got benched after he played the Niners when he looked like Marino.
I know, but Fitz was incredible. Yeah. But I also think if you're Shanahan, you kind of think, well, if I go, Garoppolo gives me the most options in that if Garoppolo's the starter, I can still sprinkle Lance. If Lance is the starter, there's no Jimmy sprinkling. So it is. I think in some ways it's safer, and safer means. You just introduce less variables when you think your team. Like part of this is they think their team is good, right?
It is not arguable that it's the safer thing to do. It is the safe thing to do. Now, sometimes the safe decision, there's a balance to this all. Now, it is a complicated decision. Like there are financial stuff, which I'm sure if it's close in a couple weeks, we'll discuss. Like there are several variables here because when we were driving home. Listen to Use Check. The players are very, very complimentary of Trey Lance. Like all these guys, especially the older guys, the Use Checks, the Trent Williams, the guys that have been in the league a long time, they're no different than me and you who've been going to these practices for a decade. Like they know what it looks. They're like, damn, this kid's clearly got some elite skills. Now there's more to playing quarterback than just elite skills. It's everything, right? It's not just accuracy or toughness. It's situations. It's knowing it's the whole thing. It's a fucking tough thing to do, which there is no arguing that Jimmy today, if you had to play a game tomorrow, would be more prepared. He has less to think about. You can give him plays. He just knows what he's doing. Why? He started games, right? I mean, the crazy thing with Trey is he didn't even get that many. Like at least Mac Jones last year played in 14 games. Justin Fields, right? They're used to the rhythm of a season. This guy's not even used to the rhythm of a season. He's a couple years removed. There are only so many Trent Williams that could take a year off and just come back and be like, yeah, I'm elite. But he had already been playing forever. So it's like usually the young players that there's a flow to it all.
Yeah.
That is, and that's another area Kyle could easily say, like, he's just, there's a lot going on. He hasn't been playing. There are a lot of arguments that you could easily go with Jimmy, even if it's like tied. And I've always said tied, I'm going with the young guy. And I think Kyle's going with Jimmy.
Yeah, which again gives him more options to later make that move.
I think luckily, too, Jimmy is accomplished enough with the group, with the Kittles, Debo, the Super Bowl team, where it's not let's say the next couple weeks, Justin Fields just takes off. And people were like, what does Khalil Mack care about Andy Dalton, right? Or Roquan Smith or the other guys on, Allen Robinson on that team. They're just like, let's just go with the best player. He has no equity in the room. There is a lot of built up equity for Jimmy with those guys of just they played in big ass games with them.
Well, one thing I was thinking today watching practice, where it really is now, we're excited to go out there. You saw how fired up they were all over football. Teams were to get in front of fans.
It's
the dog days.
Football season today, though.
But it's the dog. This is where you start going like you hear the cliche. And it's true. The players going, I'd love to practice against somebody else. Right? There's a couple more scuffles. Kinlaw's pushing people again, like happens twice a practice. It does kind of feel like maybe you are in a little bit of the dog days and you're forcing your way through it. And I think the element still, as many snaps as we've seen, as many takes as we've had, we have not gotten game action yet. We just haven't gotten it yet. So we'll get that. But watching it today, it crossed my mind. And we've talked about Garoppolo's experience in New England. Like, he's been through all of this many, many, many times. He's been through it a lot. Right? Trey Lance, this thing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. On one hand, you look at the calendar and you're like, 35 days to the season, not a lot of time. But it's a long time if you don't know what day it is, like the players, right? Like Juszczyk said today. Like, you don't know what day it is. You just kind of show up. You do your work. You do your thing. So it's a marathon. And one great practice or two great practices or a couple of great throws, you got to stack them on top of each other. And it's what I've said I really like about Lance is his consistency. Like, his consistency, he's got good consistency. But
you know what sucks?
Garoppolo's been through it.
Is you're playing the Chiefs this weekend, but can you imagine how big the game would be if like you were opening week 1 with the Chiefs? I mean, it'd be one of the biggest games in the NFL, but you just see the Chiefs preseason game. It's hard. Like, even you and I, like, it is what it is, right? You can't really it's the Chiefs, right? Because it's just, is Mahomes going to play? Probably not. But I do think one of the better teams in the league, you could argue, I mean, they're the favorite right now, the betting favorite to win. And I think part of that is the NFC is harder than the AFC. But the one thing, when you have a really good team, and we saw this years ago with Harbaugh's teams and those really good Seattle teams, the first half in a preseason game against an elite team, their backups are pretty fucking good, right? So and I'll be the first to say, like, I'm not a huge preseason second half guy, but depending on the team you're playing, like, even if Kelsey and Mahomes are on the sideline, like, their fringe, half their starters and their backups, like, those guys do play in the regular season against major roles. And I've been around Andy enough. And I would imagine Kyle too. Like, Andy ain't just coming in like, we'll just run our plays. Like, he's looking, he knows. He's going to run some plays. It's a pretty good little test, I think, this week. Just see where you're at, right? Because the one thing you say about the Chiefs is they run a high-level professional operation, and so do the Niners, right? We've been going to these practices now. Like, they're guys, it's a serious operation. But just, it's another thing, like, when you just see a new team. And I think sometimes in the dog days of summer, Jimmy and I think the quarterbacks are constantly seeing different shit. But when you're a Debo or an Ayuk, every day you're going up against Mosley or whatever. By about day 4 or 5, especially when you've played for a couple years with a guy, you know all the strengths and weaknesses. You're like, when I go left, he puts his hand, I can rip through this. When you play a guy for the first time, you're like, I wonder what, the Honey Badger, we played him once 2 years ago in the Super Bowl. Again, Honey Badger might not even play, but just whoever is on you don't have a feel. That to me, and we'll get into like the random players a little bit longer. Like, it's Trey Sermon knows, like, I can get by Greenlaw when I cut it here. You don't quite know that when you're fucking playing the Chiefs guy. All of a sudden you're like, damn, that guy's a little faster. Damn, he's not as fast. That to me is, and I think with the quarterbacks, it's why I think so often the preseason games just can look terrible, because I think a lot of guys are feeling it out and you just don't even know. They're not as bad as they look sometimes, like the rhythm of the offense. You don't really know what to do against other guys. You're just out of it. The first one, I think by the second or third, you're a little more comfortable in that setting.
Yeah, and that's where the joint practice, I mean, if you had a joint practice before the first week of preseason games, maybe that would help, right? The Niners joint practice doesn't come until next week.
Yeah.
Where you've seen other guys. But I think that kind of thing showed up today. It's shown up before. Emmanuel Mosley picked off Garoppolo in the end zone, and watching Mosley before the play, it seemed like he kind of knew he was. He was communicating a lot. He kind of, and it was, I think it was a fourth down throw. Jimmy had to throw it. He said, but
I think there are a ton of joint practices next week. I wonder if the setup of this preseason, everyone just waited till after, because like Jets Packers, LaFleur Sala, like that's kind of a random one, but they're doing a joint practice.